everyone, in today's lesson we are going to talk about the French Revolution. Hang in there, it's going to be a long one. There's a lot of stuff to cover. Again, we're not going to go through every single little detail, but there's some more stuff in here that we might not have been exposed to because, hey, we live in America, not France. So make sure you're in your interactive notebook and you're following along. All right, we're on page 5 of your interactive notebook. And again, today we're talking about the French Revolution. Let's start off with our essential question. So how did economic and social inequalities in the old regime help cause the French Revolution? Like I said in the intro, we're going to be a little bit long-winded here today because there is a lot to cover, and some of you may have never been exposed to the French Revolution. It's a little bit different than the American Revolution. We've kind of grown up hearing about it. French Revolution, maybe not so much. So hang in tight. We're going to try and make this as short and sweet as possible. Good try. All right. The old order or the old regime. This was a social and political system in France during the 1770s. France was divided into 3 social classes known as estates. These are privileged estates, meaning that different estates had different privileges. The first estate was made up primarily of the Catholic clergy, and they owned 10% of the land of France, and they paid little to no taxes. The second estate is going to be made up of rich nobles, and they're about 2% of the population, so a very small amount, and they own about 20% of the land, so they're very, very wealthy. The third estate is going to be the largest estate. It's going to be about 97% of the population, and 97% of those people are going to be either peasants, urban workers, middle class, so just kind of your common person. They have very few privileges, not much to, they don't have say, and they're going to pay the bulk of the taxes, and they are the ones that want change. They are the ones that are calling for this revolution. Now, what's going to happen to make things change? The Enlightenment, our old friend, is back again. The ideas that came out of that are going to inspire some of those people who are members of the Third Estate. They're upset with the high taxes and the rising costs, and those are leading to a damaged economy in France in the 1780s. King Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette are well known during this time period for their life of luxury and extravagance. And it's kind of a smack in the face to that 97% that's like, yo, we have like no food and you're like living up here like literal a king and queen. So people are upset with their rule. Louis actually doubles the nation's debt during his term. The banks refuse to lend him more money. His poor decisions, lack of patience, they lead to a lot of problems in France. He ends up calling something called the Estates General. He has all the representatives of the 3 estates get together and kind of try to hammer out some of these problems. The Third Estate during the Estates General has little to no power, especially under the old rule and in coming into this Estates General. So they decide to leave. The first 2 estates kind of gang up on them. And so the Third Estate's like, all right, we don't want to be part of this estates thing anymore. We don't want to be part of the Estates General. We're going to set up our own, and it's going to be called the National Assembly. And it's going to be a new legislature to make new reforms throughout the country of France. That sparks what becomes known as the Tennis Court Oath, where delegates decide to come in and write a new constitution for the country of France. Rumors fly in Paris that Louis wants to try and suppress the National Assembly, and so that leads to what we would say is the kickoff of the revolution. July 14th, 1789, a large mob comprised primarily of the Third Estate attacks and seizes the Bastille. The Bastille was a big weapons arsenal in France, and so you want to think of this as like their Independence Day. So if you want to compare it to the United States or the American Revolution, July 4th, 1776 is said to be our Independence Day. July 14th, 1789 would be France's Independence Day in terms of the revolution. So during this time period, we have a great fear that sweeps through France. There's a lot of rumors and panic. that's spreading through France like wildfire. This time period also becomes known as an actual Great Fear because we have attacks by peasants that are taking place all across France. They actually destroy all the legal papers that bind them to that old school feudal system. And by October of 1789, we have women who are actually revolting because the price of bread had just skyrocketed. And, peasants are literally starving in the street. So they demand action, and it forces Louis as well as Marie Antoinette to return from Versailles to Paris to kind of juggle these things and take care of them. This is actually where the famous quote, "Let them eat cake," is supposedly came from, but historians actually say that Marie Antoinette never actually said that. But a lot of people credit this time period, the fact that people were starving in the street, Marie Antoinette, because she was just so lavish and kind of out of tune with the times. Oh, just let them eat cake, like whatever. But she actually never said that. Now, we have another assembly that forms in France, or reforms in France. So the National Assembly actually adopts something known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. Revolutionary leaders take the slogan of liberty, equality, fraternity, and we see that this assembly seizes lands back from the church, and they turn clergy officials or church officials into public officials or secular officials. This action does kind of alarm a lot of other peasants because a lot of them are still devout Catholics. Louis is very worried about his future, and he tries to escape France, but he and the royal family are caught near the border with the Netherlands, so he's unsuccessful in that escape. We see a lot of divisions start to develop in France as well. By September 1791, the assembly finishes their new constitution, and they come up with a legislative assembly, which is a new body that's going to be devoted to creating and passing laws. We have major problems in France, including debt and food shortages. And the assembly splits into three main groups, or it kind of looks like political parties almost: radicals, moderates, and conservatives. So the monarchy starts to come to a decline in 1792 when one group, the Jacobins, they start to gain control, and they desperately want a republic. Louis XVI is actually tried before the convention. He's convicted of treason or conspiring against the liberty of a nation, and he's publicly executed by the guillotine. The guillotine was a baby or a product of the revolution. It was a way of executing by off with your head. Look it up. They're kind of morbid. So he is executed. Marie Antoinette is not executed, but Louis XVI is. Not all the people in France, though, at this time are supporting all of these revolutionary changes. So again, like I said, it is causing some splits, and it's obviously bringing the monarchy to an end. After Louis XVI, enter Maximilien Robespierre. This gentleman here, he comes in. He was a Jacobin leader, and he rules France for a year, and it becomes not the best year in France's history. He is the leader of the Committee for Public Safety. He ultimately is a dictator, and his year is known as the Reign of Terror. So he killed a lot of his opponents. Thousands died during this Reign of Terror, including a lot of former allies, as well as Marie Antoinette. 85% of those who died during this terror were actually middle class and lower class. So people he should have probably been fighting for actually kind of turned against. So after his reign, he is arrested in 1794. He's arrested, also executed by guillotine, and the terror his reign of terror resulted in public opinion kind of shifting away from those extreme revolutionaries and away from those radicals. We have moderates that come in and write yet another constitution. They put in place a two-house legislature, very similar to the United States. Two-house legislature. We have Congress with the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then they also have a 5-man directory. And those two bodies come together and restore order. And that paves the way for a new government that's going to be set up by Napoleon Bonaparte, who was the commander of some of the French armies. We're not going to talk about Napoleon because we would be here all day long. So you'll see him later if you take a world history course or a French history course if you progress on to college, but we're going to leave him for another day. So again, we're talking about the French Revolution here. And remember, a lot of this is influenced by the Enlightenment ideas, just like we had in the American Revolution. We are going to spend our next episode talking about the Latin American Revolution. So make sure you're here for that. Thanks for watching.